Hey, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Connection Loop podcast, a place where we have on sales leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyone related to growing their sales so the audience out there like yourselves can learn from these stories and strategies. Today, we're excited to have on John Barrows. He is a top sales trainer and coach and the CEO of JB Sales, and he has a learning lab with programs like Filling the Funnel and Driving the Close. Now, these courses give sales professionals and teams the structure, tools, and techniques they need to drive immediate results at every stage of the sales process, while at the same time creating that framework that can be used and evolved with. One of John's big sayings is, I can help you sell without losing your soul. But other than that, most importantly, he's a huge Boston sports fan, as am I. John, welcome into the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, I think if we started talking Boston sports, we'd lose a lot of people. So
I know, seriously, we would. But you know what? We're realistic Boston sports guys. Mm-hmm. You know, that's important.
Well, actually, as a small caveat, right? So Gary Vaynerchuk, who I met a while back, right? Who's a huge New York fan, Jets, the whole thing, right? He hates Patriots fans like at the highest level. And so I did a Q&A with him where I was at a table with 10 other people and he got around to me. He's like, yo, you're the Boston kid, aren't you? I was like, all right, can I give you some perspective? Yes, we are obnoxious because this was back in the day when we were like, winning everything. I go, yes, we are obnoxious, but there's two types of Boston fans. There's 40 years and older and 35 and under. And he goes, what? I go, look, if you're 40 and over, or at this point, 45 and older, you remember how bad we were at everything. The Patriots were god awful. The Red Sox never won shit. The Celtics were in some pretty dark years back in the 90s and 80s and, whatever. And the Bruins hadn't won shit. So for now, like, we genuinely appreciate what's happening. There's a genuine appreciation for this winning. Whereas if you're 35 years and younger, you've just known winning. So you're just a pompous ass. Yep. So when you think about Patriots fans or Boston fans, think about them in that context and give the older ones a little bit of a break.
Couldn't have said it more perfectly. I remember Sullivan Stadium back in the day.
Oh, I have a bench. I literally have part of the bench. We had season tickets. I got a cut of it when I was at the last game. I was at the snowball game.
Yeah, the snowball game. That's a good way to put it. That's the way we remember it. Everyone else remembers it as a duck rule. So, John, take everyone through. You've got a massive amount of experience in sales. You've taught so many different entrepreneurs, sales leaders, teams. Mm-hmm. You're really integrated into a lot of different areas currently in sales and what you used to do in terms of strategy over the years. Just bring people up to speed with, where you started and kind of what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, I fell into it just like everybody else. I think sales is one of those professions that you don't. It's kind of why I wrote the book with my daughter. I want to be in sales when I grow up because no kid ever says that. It's always the default profession. Everybody goes to school, whatever they think they want to be when they grow up at 18 years old, which I think is insulting. And for me, I went to college because, I was supposed to. And the reason I chose University of Maryland was because you didn't have to declare your major for a couple of years because I had no idea. Right. And so I tried engineering. I tried art. I tried science. I was terrible at all of it. And I kind of ended up with marketing because felt like it was pretty easy, quite frankly. And it combined all my skills. But then when I got out of the real world, I was like, I don't know if none of these jobs look cool to me. You know what I mean? And I can't make enough money. So, hey, let me get in sales. And I ended up getting into sales with DeWalt Power Tools. So Black & Decker, who owns DeWalt, they are right next to University of Maryland, their headquarters. So they recruit heavily out of that. And my first job was sales, but it wasn't. It was more event marketing. So my job was to drive around with a Dodge Ram pickup truck with a bunch of kids around the area and give away free tools. That was pretty much it to construction sites, which was awesome. Yeah. Then I was kind of top in the region for that. And then I got promoted to like the Home Depot team where you had to sell DeWalt to Home Depot. They had to buy it, but I had to take that $10,000 order and make it a $50,000 order, right? Through cross sells and end caps and all that stuff. So that's where I learned about relationships with the store managers and those type of things. It was a little bit more sales, but it wasn't like hard. Then I got into Xerox, and that's where it was like, okay, and I went through the 8-week sales training program with them and got in territory, sold copiers to the government, which is about as brutal as it gets. And then after that, I got into startups. Even though I didn't know I was in startup, like I had that DNA. A friend of mine had started, and I just didn't like the corporate stuff because I didn't like being put in a box. I didn't like not making a difference. Right. And then a buddy of mine had started a company, and I joined as the VP of sales, and I took this training. It was called I took every training. I took Sandler, Miller, Hyman, Taz, Spin, all of it. And I came across this one group called Basho. And Basho was the first training that I took that I loved. And it was super tactical and it helped. We ended up being the fastest growing company in Massachusetts for a few years in a row, and then sold off to Staples. Staples came and bought us. I don't exactly fit the mold of corporate, so eventually Staples offered me another position. They fired me, and I was looking for a job. And Basho said, "John, you want to be a trainer?" And I was like, "No, I don't like trainers for the most part, because most trainers are either failed sales professionals or professional presenters.
Yep.
But their model was you had to use the training to sell, so you could train. So you couldn't just be a trainer. You had to be a sales rep that trained. And I love that, right?
You had to live it. You had to live it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, because I just don't believe in sales specifically. If you're not in it, I have a hard time listening to you. That's why I still sell to this day. Like I'm a two-person show. I do all my own prospecting. I do all my own negotiations. I manage my pipeline. I do all my podcasts. I do all my social shit, because I don't believe you can teach people how to do this stuff if you're not in the middle of it, seeing what's happening, especially to your point with how fast things are moving right now.
Yeah.
So join them. They screwed it up and I took it over. So long story short, went off on my own about 15 years ago with JB Sales, and working with Salesforce, LinkedIn, Box, Dropbox, a lot of the cool companies out there, Amazon, and those type of things as well. So
it just goes to show you, like, I think there is real value, and people appreciate now more than ever, because we live in such a time of transparency that, like, hey, this guy John knows what he's talking about, because this guy John does this every day. Yeah. Like when he says, "Hey, do this on your social post," guess what? He just did that on his social post. You know what I mean?
Well, when you say we live in a world of transparency, I actually think we live in a more fake world than ever. Yeah. Everybody says that they're an influencer now. And it's like, when I look at their sharing content and everything else, I'm like, you have fucking 2 years as an SDR. Like, in what world are you telling me how to negotiate a deal for an enterprise? Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I cringe sometimes. It's a weird balance for me, because I don't want to ever prevent anybody or talk shit about somebody who's trying to build their brand and trying to help. And as long as I think they're trying to help in some way, shape, or form, I got no hate for you. Okay. Yep. But I do question some of the stuff, because I'm like, just because you're good at presenting that doesn't mean that works. And it actually happened a lot when I had some reps working with me. They would regurgitate my tips, right? Like, I got a lot of tips and nuggets and all that other stuff. And they'd be like, "Oh, that's a great JB tip." And they would say it. And I'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, that tip works in this context. It does not work across the board. So don't sit out there and start professing to people, "Oh, go do this," or "This is how you should do that." It's like, no. Yeah. It works when that thing happens. That's when you do it, right? So I think the context is lost with a lot of these tips and stuff like that that's being put out there. But when you do come across people who know what they're talking about and who walk the walk, those are the ones that you can kind of, maybe not everybody, but the people who know. Yes.
You know
what I mean?
I agree. They recognize what that thing is and when to implement it and when to use it. It's really recognizing scenarios. Yeah. Let's dive into, I think, one of the coolest things you talk about. And what does it mean to sell without losing that soul inside of us? What does that mean to you? And what does that mean to everybody out there while they're executing what they do on a day-to-day?
Yeah, I think this comes down to my belief that sales, I think when done right, is one of the greatest professions in the world. But when done wrong, I think it's one of the worst, quite frankly. Yeah. And I'll call out names. Grant Cardone, Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort. Like, dirtbags. Straight up dirtbags. All they care about is making money. They don't give a shit about the value that they bring to the client. And I think they probably justify ends versus the means, blah, blah, blah. Ultimately, I'm helping them make money, blah, blah, blah. But it's just, look, we have a bad reputation in sales for a reason.
Right.
But if you look at sales as, here's another, like, I think if you think sales is about convincing anybody of anything, I think you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
Sales is about helping people solve problems or achieve goals, period. That's it. And if your problems aren't big enough or your goals aren't big enough, why are we having this conversation? And so that's where I think about losing your soul, right? Is the number one thing I think you need to be successful in sales, genuinely successful, whatever that means to you, but it means to me, is a belief in what you do. If you believe that what you're selling genuinely makes a difference for the right client, not for everybody,
Mhm.
then sales is a lot about that transfer of enthusiasm. Right.
Yes.
It's like, I feel that strongly about what I believe in. That's why I believe most people are in sales, right? You could take the most, like one of my first startups was all, was tech, right? So it was outsourced IT services. I was one sales guy within 50 engineers, and, 10 of those engineers were Linux engineers. I don't know
Mhm.
if you've ever hung out with Linux engineers.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've heard that. Yeah.
They're a different breed, right?
Right.
So, I mean, the joke a Linux engineer told me is, how do you know a Linux engineer likes you? It's they look at your shoes instead of theirs when they're talking to you, right? So, you have these engineers who would swear upside down and sideways that they are not in sales, right?
Mhm.
And then I'll
Mhm.
be like, okay, yeah, okay, let's take sales out of the equation here. Could you explain to me the last time you fixed something or created something or were in a line of code and you saw something unique and you addressed it and it made a difference, right? And you will literally watch them light up like a Christmas tree. And they'll be like, oh, well, the other day I was deep in code and I was doing this and I fixed it. And I was like, holy shit, man. If I
Mhm.
needed that,
Yeah.
I'd want you to give it, I'd want to buy it from you.
Yeah.
So that transfer of enthusiasm is so important. And losing your soul is really just about not doing it, just doing it for the right reasons. And look, my opinion, it's the right reasons. So we can have that argument all day long. It is subjective as far as what I believe is the right way to sell. It is
Yeah.
subjective of what I think is bad versus good. But I'm more along the lines of ethics and doing the right thing and helping people out and all that other shit than trying to convince anybody. Cause that's the challenge, right? It's influence versus manipulation.
That's right. Yeah, I
Right.
think it's like when you phrase something like, "Hey, this is the way you can," uh, almost I think the average person will look at it, "You're just trying to pull the wool over my eyes."
Yeah.
You're asking this because you just want that. And
Yep.
it's like, look, at the end of the day, sales, like any other profession, you have to make money like we all do. We have to
Sure.
live and pay our
Yep.
bills. But if you're like you're saying, if you're coming from a place of genuine excitement about what you do and you
Mhm.
believe this is going to help you get where you want to go,
Mhm.
let me walk you through how we can do that and how it
Yeah.
affects you. And I think at that point, you're just like you said, it's a transfer of enthusiasm, and
Mhm.
that's a good way to put it.
Yeah,
So,
and look, you do have to influence people because people don't
mhm,
always know what they need, right?
sure,
I mean, that is true. But manipulation is where, because the problem is that as humans, we are easily manipulated.
yeah,
And if
right,
you are good from a psychology standpoint and you know how to read people, man, you can get people to do almost fucking anything.
right,
And
I agree.
that's the danger
Yeah.
of being really good at sales, right? It's like being, it's like the dark side versus,
I
being
was
a
going to just say that.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like, you want to be a Sith Lord or do you want to be a Jedi, right? I try to
mhm,
be the Jedi of sales as opposed to the Sith Lords, because the Sith Lords can't. The thing that sucks, though, quite frankly, and this is what I struggle with a lot, is you tend to make a lot more money being on the Sith Lord side of the house. A lot
yeah,
more money faster, right? Like 10x. Like, let's be real. Grant
yeah,
Cardone is actually far more than 10x me.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like his book 10x bullshit, all that
true.
stuff. Oh, just 10x your goals. But the dude's like 1,000x me. He's a multi-millionaire. He's got, and I'm not. You know what I mean? Like, I do well, but
Yeah,
I don't know. And and I say, oh, well, I can sleep at night, and he'll probably say, well, I sleep on my golden pillows, so fuck you. That type of
right,
thing.
right,
But
right.
I don't know. It's just how people approach things, and I just decide to approach it my way.
And there are some people that wanna be talked to that way by that Grant Cardone
Yeah,
guy.
yeah,
There's some people that love that, they eat it up,
yep,
that they want that, and unfortunately, well, not fortunately, unfortunately, there are people for everybody, like dating. There's someone out there
yep,
that's gonna match up with
yep,
someone that likes that message, you know what I
yeah,
mean? But you're talking about, I think, a good place of where if you're starting a sales team, you want your team to think that way.
yeah.
That seems like the most healthy way to do it.
If you're long term, especially if you're long term and you're not like, transaction oriented type of sale, like I think you can get away with it with car sales. I think you can get away with it with real estate bullshit like that they spew, or like funding. You know what I mean? I get 700 calls a day about how they can finance everything that I've done,
Yeah,
because it's like a one time thing. Cool, I got your cash. See you later. It doesn't matter.
yeah,
I think you'd still maybe get away with that these days, but when it comes to B2B sales, I just don't think there's any room for it at all.
yeah. No, and they're looking for that. They're looking to hear from reps, not to like. And if they know what they want, show me how to get there,
Yeah.
and believe in what you're telling me. I think that's
Yep.
one of the biggest things. Let's jump here. So predictable revenue. Why is the predictable revenue model dead, and what do we do, John?
I have a special place in my heart for this topic.
Let's hit it.
I've never thought the predictor. So back up. When I was at Thrive Networks, my first startup, I actually stumbled upon the predictable revenue model well before it was predictable revenue. So this is back in 2000. Because as a small business owner, as a VP of sales for a small business, what I was doing was I was a player coach. So I'd have, hire full cycle sales reps, right? But my management style at that time was, hey, keep up. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have time to babysit with you. Just follow along, watch, you'll learn a shitload. Here's your quota. Let's go. Ask me questions, right? But inevitably they kept failing because they were good at one, but not all parts of the sales process. Yeah. So I instead of hiring sales reps and forcing them into this and going through the definition of insanity, I took a step back and I said, wait a minute, let's break down the sales process into 3 roles, right? Opening, processing, and closing. You got to find the clients, you got to meet with the clients, you got to close the clients. Mm-hmm. So at the time, my favorite part of the sales process was meeting with clients. Okay. I could develop rapport and all that. I could close, but I wasn't a hardcore closer. Never have been. But we had a CEO who was a hardcore closer, like just a jackass. And if I needed a heavy to come in to close a deal, he would do it. So we had the 2 pieces. So then there was like this piece. Okay, well, so instead of hiring, another sales rep, I hired a director of business development to manage channels. Yep. So we needed 30 meetings a month to be able to hit our number. I knew our equation. So the channels were, SEO, inbound, events, partnerships, and then outbound cold calls. Yep. So we hired 2 sales reps to then do the cold calls. And then their whole thing was they'd eventually move into my role. I would then move down to the closer role. And it was this beautiful funnel that helped us scale. Yeah. At the time it worked. I think it works for a small business because you can help cultivate that. Yeah. Then predictable revenue comes out. Mm-hmm. Around the same time, 2010-ish was really when it hit. Salesforce was starting to grow really fast. We were coming out of that economy where we were now like this, especially in the tech and the SaaS world. Yep. And the predictable revenue model took off like wildfire. But it wasn't because it was customer centric in any way, shape, or form. Yep. It was great for us as businesses because theoretically we could hire cheap talent, beat the shit out of them, grow them into sales professionals, and create this beautiful funnel for us as an org, right? Yep. But what client in their right mind wants to be handed off 5 times before they talk to somebody who actually knows what they're talking about?
A very small percentage.
Right? I mean, think about, here's the real world example of this model is when you have a problem with your cable, okay? So you have a problem with your cable box, right? So what do? You unplug it, you make sure you reboot it yourself, right? And then you sit on hold for 30 minutes. You get some like low-level person and it's like, hey, have you unplugged it yet? Have you done? And you're like, yes, I've done all that shit, right? And 30, 45 minutes later, they get to, well, sorry, this is above my pay grade at this point. I'm going to have to bring in somebody who actually knows what they're talking about, right? Then you wait on hold for another 20, 30 minutes. And then you finally talk to maybe an engineer who can actually help you. And then when you get to that person, they're like, oh, so how can I help you? You're like, please, God, please tell me that kid took notes in the system and I don't have to explain the whole fucking thing again. But inevitably, sorry, no. So now you're pissed at the person that can help you, right? Right. That's the predictable revenue model. We have we put a 22-year-old kid who has no experience, no business acumen, trying to call executives with, a piece of shit value proposition. And if they trip over, like if they happen to catch an executive with the right message at the right time, which is rare, all right, well, I'm interested. Tell me more. Oh, sorry, boss. Now I have to, next week, I got to schedule with my AE. And then the AE gets on, asks the same dumbass questions, and then still probably can't answer it. And then has to bring the SE in to really show the client what's going on, the sales engineer. Yeah. And then we offer a massive discount like that. Like, what world does that value to me as a client, as a potential client, right? So, okay, grow at all costs. Nobody cared. Money was free for about 10 years there, whatever. Yep. Well, then 2023 happened and the tech industry came to a screeching halt and money wasn't free anymore. And forget about AI here for a second, because that's a whole nother layer of complexity to this. Sure. But now all of a sudden you got a bunch of reps. And I've done the research, by the way, the average SDR, 65% hit quota, 65%. Yep. They're way more expensive than they used to be. The average OTE of an SDR is about 90 grand. If your ACV is less than $10,000, this is real data here. If it's say it's $10,000 ACV, the amount that it costs based on all the metrics and everything else for an SDR to get that client, 60% of the revenue is taken up just by the SDR.
Wow.
So the cost of the SDR to get that client, not get the meeting, to get the client is 60% of the first year revenue. That doesn't include the AE's cost. That doesn't include the SE's cost. That doesn't include the discount that they gave. None of that. So 60% of the revenue a client generates is eaten up by the cost of an SDR. So that's data point one. Second one is SDRs only stay at their company, not their role, their company for 1.6 years.
That's the average?
That's the average.
Wow.
So now the idea that an SDR is going to become your AE, that's out the window. That's gone. Like, so all the investment that we give in the SDRs at the early stages, that with the promise of the ROI later on, forget that. So therefore that model's completely trash.
Yep.
And by the way, the ones that do stay, less than 50% of them actually go into sales. The other 50% go into customer success. They get out of sales altogether because it's fucking what? Like, I don't want to do this shit. Or they go into, management or something else. So literally 60% quota, 65% quota. They cost 60% of the first year's revenue of a client. And so so your lifetime value of a client has to be like, $1 million for it to work, for crying out loud. Right. They stay less than 1.6 years at the company. And even the ones that do, 50% of them spend less. And oh, by the way, the failure rate when they become an AE is massive as well. So you add all that stuff up, man, and no logical person can look at the SDR model and say it's viable at this point. You just can't.
That was a very good masterclass on breaking it down. That was amazing, John. I mean, like anyone just watching, there you go. I couldn't have said it any better, right there.
I have all the data too to support it. So if you think I'm wrong, I will show you report after report after report that reinforces what I'm talking about right now. And it's like I feel like we're as a SaaS industry where the emperor has no clothes, and everybody's pretending like it still does. Yeah. And I'm like, no, the fucking emperor is naked. Like, it's blatantly obvious that the emperor is naked here. And I don't, by the way, I'm not saying that SDRs aren't worth it. You're right. I'm saying we need to fundamentally reshift and refocus that role to give these kids a chance. Because, let's add to the fact that not a single indicator is moving in the right direction as far as conversion ratios. Connect rates down year over year. Conversion rate of qualification call to qualified call down. So like email delivery rates down. Like literally every indicator of an outbound prospecting thing is going in this direction. So, and oh, by the way, AI can now do all the SDR work better than the SDR can.
Sure. I know we played with some of that stuff too. Well, transition to this then, because knowing everything that you just said, let's talk about the learning lab. Let's talk about filling the funnel, driving the close, because obviously, what you were just talking about, these SDRs are not being set up for success.
Nope.
And if they were, then you probably see them staying at the company longer. You would see moving up into that same thing, into sales, and not jumping to marketing or anything else because they're just like, oh man, this sucks. I want out of here. So talk about that and why that sounds like you're kind of remaking the foundation and strategies for folks.
Well, I think these two programs that I've been delivering for a while now, they cover the whole spectrum, right? But it's more structure and technique. I used to be very technique oriented, right? Where it was the why you now email showing you how to write this thing, and it was awesome and it drove. But now it's not. Like now, any technique, whatever worked 3, 4, 5 months ago at this point is not working right now, right? So right now it's about creating an agile structure that we can just test and try different things constantly to figure out what works, right? So that's where I've reshaped this content across the board to allow that, and to allow and to try to get us back to fundamentals, because we've completely skipped that. Part of my keynote is, I position 2010 to 2023 as the golden age of sales, especially in tech, because if you got into tech sales after 2010, sorry, it hadn't been that hard. Just hasn't. We've way over engineered. I mean, we literally get away with blasting out template emails, setting up disco calls with anybody with a pulse, droning through demos, right? Offering a massive discount. And that's been sales for the past 10 years. That's not sales. That's
Like
what it
cool
is.
product, low price.
Yeah.
Just
And
legit.
we've overprocessed it. We've taught way more on the process and the tech than we
Yeah.
have the fundamentals.
Got it.
And
Yep.
so now we have a whole generation of kids that fundamentally don't know how to sell.
Right.
They
Right.
don't even know how to have a conversation, look you in the eye,
Right.
right?
Right.
So I'm trying to get back to those fundamentals, but then leverage this AI, because if we don't start playing around with this AI, we're going to get smoked by it. Like, period.
Yep.
Like, there's just no question. It's so blatantly. I'm writing a newsletter right now about, basically, I'm terrified and fascinated at the same time with what's happening right now.
We just said the same thing talking about the other day,
Yeah.
because I'm a super creative guy,
Yeah.
and it's very like exciting, but really worrisome.
Fast, like I'm horrified, like Terminator shit. Like,
Yep.
yep. Like, if I get stoned, like, I go down dark holes about, like, whoa, okay,
Right.
like I might as well unplug from all of this, because what's the point, right?
Right.
So and we've all heard, you're not going to get replaced by AI. You're going to get replaced by sales reps who learn how to use it, all that fun stuff. And that's real, right? So I think we're headed for 80-20 here, Pareto's rule across the board, that the 20% of any population, sales, marketing, CS, lawyers, doctors, you name it, 20% who actually learn how to leverage this stuff and have the contextualized knowledge to be able to figure out critical thinking and how to use it are going to be absolutely invaluable and probably make shitloads of money. But the other 80% of people who are just going through the motions are going to get smoked. And so I'm trying to help out the kids who, so I in my keynote, I always end my trainings with this, because I did this one time. And I was doing a big presentation, and at the end, one of the kids whose Q&A was like 500 reps. And the kids just said, "Hey, John, all those logos up there, all the ones I put up for my clients, pretty much a lot of them are competitors of ours." And he said, "If you're going to train us all on the same stuff, like, how are we going to differentiate?" And my answer to him was 10, 60, 30. And he goes, "What?" I go, 10, 60, 30. I go, 10% of you in this room are going to take what I tell you and execute at the highest level, because that's the type of people you are. 60% of you in this room are going to do something different because it's easy and it makes sense. And 30% of you in this room ain't going to do shit different. So the question isn't how many people can I train? The question is what percentage do you want to be in? And I don't think it's a choice anymore. Well, it is a choice, but at this point, I think that bottom 30%, they're irrelevant and they know it. I think they do, right? I always felt like there was room for them, though, because just as a society, there's always room for the laggards, whatever, who cares? I don't think there's room for them anymore. I think they're just going to get absolutely wiped out, and I'm watching it happen. The 60%, the 10%, they don't need me. I don't even know if I'm in the 10%, right? Like, it's just the ones who are constantly, like, always out in the head, right? Whatever. It's the 60%. But the bottom part of that 60, like the bottom 50% of that 60%, they're unfortunately those B players that just kind of are skating by and just doing enough. They're irrelevant. And unfortunately, I don't think they know it yet.
Got it.
It's that top part of that 60%, that upper end of that 50% of that 60%, the people who want to get better and are willing to put in the work.
Yeah.
Like, I don't offer a single silver bullet. Anytime somebody says, "John, do you have a great template email that I could do?" I say, "Fuck off. Like, get out of here. I want nothing to do." "John, what's the best question I can ask?" My ass. Leave me alone. You have the wrong mentality when you're asking, what's the best this? What's the best that? That's why I have such disdain for people pushing that shit out on social.
It's like cutting the line to just say, do this thing, but it has no context. It has no, all that.
So, but the ones that are like, "Hey, I know I got to get better. I'm willing to put in the work and I got the effort and all that other stuff, man, I will literally give them everything that I got." And so both of those programs are really meant to get back to those fundamentals and give structure so we can figure things out. And that's where, to me, I think as a profession, we really need to tap back into the art of selling.
Great timing of it too, like you said.
Yeah. And because right now, I mean, quite frankly, the more I pay attention to this AI stuff, like, IQ is over.
Yeah.
The battle of IQ is over. It's already smarter than us in every way, shape, and form. So it's EQ that we have to focus on.
Yes.
And unfortunately, this whole generation, since COVID specifically, has grown up in this world.
Yeah.
This is a transactional world. This isn't a relationship-driven world.
Right.
I can't see your body language right now when I make a comment. You can easily fake your interest in this little square to me.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I sit in front of you and I watch your body language scooch in your chair, or like look right here instead of right here, like, okay, something's off there, right? So I think we need to get back to the humanity, because that's all we're gonna have left.
Yep.
Like as long I keep telling reps is as long as there's a human buying on the other side, we have a chance.
Yeah, as long as you're not selling to a bot.
Right. I mean, look, when AI starts buying shit, we're all
Right.
screwed. Like, might as
Right,
well
and of course, that's the currency. That's what's gonna happen.
Right. But
Yeah.
as long as there's a human ultimately making a decision, there's gonna be a need for a human connection.
Yep.
And that isn't me reading off of a script. That isn't me going, if you say A, I say B. If you say C, I say D.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That isn't a sequence of a 15 touch sequence because SalesLoft tells me it's 15 touches and I have to make sure that I add these. Like, that's not what it is.
Yeah.
It's having a real conversation with a real person about their real problems and seeing if you can help them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's people can feel that when you have those kinds of conversations, you know, because like what we do with Dub with our videos, and when I meet with folks and we talk, it's when you realize, like you said, you're having an actual conversation, people they feel that, and then they're relaxed, they're talking to you more about what the deal is, and it's just a more effective combo and a better experience for both.
And it's so much easier these days to do it than ever, right? Because it's so obvious how people are stuck in, like, buyers are stuck in the robot mode, just like sellers are. Because I still, to this day, I'll get on a phone with somebody and I'll be talking and they'll be like, well, John, let me give you a little background on our company and our history and what we do. And I'm like, all due respect, I appreciate that. I know what you do. I know who you sell. I was on your website. I have a pretty good, clear understanding of the industry and all those type of things. I do have some specific questions I have about your business based on what I've learned so far, and you literally watch them almost like unplug from the matrix. They're like, oh, wait, what? I don't have to go through this bullshit thing. And you're not going to show me your piece of shit, like 20 deck slide here. And I have to pretend like I'm interested. Like, this is actually a real conversation with somebody who's prepared for the meeting. Like, you literally watch their head explode. And it's like, is it that sad out there? And the answer is yes. And I'll tell you why, because I did this. I take sales calls just to see what's going on and how good people are. And I did, but I wanted to test something out to see if how prepared were sales reps really. Yeah. So I took 20 sales calls from SaaS things. And I'm, in the SaaS world, I'm not really that important, but in the SaaS world, I'm, kind of well known, right? So I took 20 calls from 20 vendors for 20 SaaS sales solutions. And the first question I ask on every single sales call when somebody's pitching to me is, hey, before we get going here, could you just tell me a little bit about what you know about what I do and what my business is all about?
Sure.
14 out of 20 of them couldn't even tell me I did sales training.
What? That's like the easiest thing. You Google your name. I mean, it's like the easiest thing you could possibly find out in like 3 seconds.
And by the way, all I wanted them to do, oh yeah, John, I know you do some sales training and you work some pretty cool clients and you got some on site, right? Is if they just check that box, all right, cool, let's talk.
Right.
But I either get, well, and this is the telltale sign of somebody who's never done research, because I used to do this myself, by the way, I've been on your website, but, I'd really like to hear from you some specific, about your business. I'd really rather hear from you. It's like, that's a telltale sign you have not done a damn thing. And again, take it from somebody who used to use that as the excuse. Or my other favorite is, and you see them kind of like typing in jbarrows.com, right? As they bring it over and then they read what's on the top of the screen. And it's like, okay, like, never mind. And by the way, on those calls, I hang up the phone immediately. I'm like, all right, well, you wasted my time, so I'm going to take it back. And I just literally hang up no matter what. No, even if I wanted the solution, I hang up on them. I'm like, this is because you need to get punched in the mouth to realize that that's a dipshit thing to do. And quite frankly, you were disrespecting my time. Time is the most valuable asset any of us have. So if you are not going to spend the 3 seconds it takes to go on ChatGPT and say, what is Jay Barrows sales training all about? What are some cool things? What does he do? And it spits it out to you in literally like 5 seconds. It used to take a lot longer. Now it takes like 5 seconds if you just have a half a brain. If you don't do that, I think the 3 most insulting things you can say to anybody today, sales-wise, is tell me about your business. What are your priorities? And what keeps you up at night? Those are the 3 dumbest things you can say to anybody right now. Because you could go on, hey, I'm about to meet with the VP of the CEO of a sales training organization, and this is what they sell, jbarrows.com. What are some of the priorities that would be John would be facing right now as it relates to the next 12 to 24 months? What would typically keep a guy like him up at night when it comes to this type of stuff? And what are his, those type of things like, so then you could come with, hey, John, you know what, we're working with a lot of CEOs of sales training organizations, and, walking into the new year, they're telling us that the main things that are keeping them up are X, Y, and Z. Are you seeing the same shit? Like that, just that alone changes the entire dynamic of the conversation.
Yep.
So,
and you're coming with knowledge, and you're like leading them into like the next thing that they want to talk about. Like, oh my God, you know about that. And let me expound upon that because,
Well, that, and actually you bring up a good point that I've been peeling back the onion on here, which is, obviously in sales, you ask open-ended questions, right? Open-ended, closed-ended questions. That's kind of sales 101. But what I realized is when you ask a kind of more of a general open-ended question to somebody, you're putting a lot of onus on them and you're making them do a lot of work. Because if you simply say to me, John, tell me about your priorities. Okay. First, let's set aside the fact that I've never met you before in my fucking life. And so, yeah, sure. No problem, kid. Let me explain to you all the wonderful issues that I'm having right now so you can figure out what to sell. So let's put that aside for a second.
Open the therapy session. Yeah, exactly. So let me talk to you about my childhood really quickly. And then,
right. But when you say, John, tell me about your priorities, now, if I decide to answer that question, I'm now thinking I got a million different priorities. Which ones are most relevant to this kid? And then how much information do I want to tell this person about these things before I then start to tell you about? That's why when you say, tell me about your priorities, you typically get very vague answers. Well, revenue, But if you come with a perspective, it's called anchoring in psychology, right? If I come with a perspective or a hypothesis, all of a sudden your desire to correct me or elaborate on my perspective is far greater than it is to answer an open-ended question. So if I come and say, hey, you know what, we're typically dealing with other VPs of sales in the industry, and they're telling us that, are you seeing the same stuff? You usually get, well, no, but this is, and they go into detail about what that is, or yes, and they go into much more detail about what that is.
Sure.
So by coming with a perspective, you're not an anchoring, you're not only showing them that you've done your homework, which elevates you over the majority of the sales professionals out there. You're also making it a hell of a lot easier for them to answer your questions and give you the insights that matter.
Yeah.
So,
John, we could probably talk the next 20 hours. So, but what you just dropped was I want the audience to really pay attention to this. What John just went through in the past almost 40 minutes now is some of the most detailed information you're going to get in terms of someone, by the way, nice Patriots Cup, is going to explain what is going to explain, like, not only did he cover concepts, he gave you very specific ways to strategize and do those things. So I'd highly recommend anybody out here, go to his website. We have it right here. Go check out the learning labs. Really lean into the everyday practical mentality building structural stuff that he says is important right now. When like you said, we had that 10-year period where people are like, hey, this is easy. Well, guess what? No, it's not so easy. And you have some AI competition now that's filtering into what's happening. So it couldn't be a more appropriate time to have your skill set and what you do, John. And thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Any last words before we go?
Nah, just get up, just make it happen. I mean, ultimately this is, and don't wait for it. That small thing on this is, one of the things I don't understand, the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. And, I had a kid the other day when I was showing GPTs and all this other stuff. And literally the question was like, hey, well, our company doesn't invest in the $20 version of ChatGPT for us. So what would you suggest? I usually say there's no stupid questions, but unfortunately in front of this kid, I had to call him out for being a stupid question. I'm like, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I go, what did you just ask me? And he goes, well, they don't give us that tech. So how can we use, I go, it's $20 fucking dollars.
Right.
Take out your goddamn credit card, put it on there, because you will now have a superpower for $20. If you don't think that spending $100 on your own personal tech stack is going to make you a couple of million, you shouldn't be in sales.
Right.
You shouldn't be in sales, period. Because that is a fixed mindset and you will never be successful. There's so much free training. I mean, look, I would love for people to buy my membership and join. I'll give you everything that I got, but you can also go on my YouTube channel. There's a ton of free stuff there. You could also literally go into ChatGPT and say, act like John Barrows and coach me on this, and it will do it. So stop waiting for your company to invest in a technology, to invest in training, and just fucking get it and make it fucking happen. Because if you don't, you will become irrelevant so fast that you will wake up one day and wonder what the hell happened. Why don't I have a job? I thought I was okay. No, you're not.
Yeah.
Level up.
Yeah. Hey, just do your job.
Yeah, right.
Are you
Do
passed
it well. So that was what he missed. I don't know if you saw 3 Games to Glory. He was like, well, do your job, but I forgot one piece was do it well. You don't just do your job. You got to do it well too.
That's
right?
so good. That's so perfect.
Yeah.
John, again, thank you so much. Everybody, thanks for tuning into the episode, and we'll see everybody next time.
Thanks.
See you, John.
Cheers.